Okay. So, okay.
Well, thank you so much for being here today, for traveling here to Waterford to be with us this evening and have a little conversation with us. So we have 7 prepared questions.
Okay.
We will also solicit questions from the audience, and then we'll make sure to give you an opportunity to ask us some questions as well. So we have about an hour. We started at 7:16 according to that clock. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's do it. So given our significant investments in curriculum and in conjunction with our strategic plan, how would you build upon our practices to help strengthen and improve academic achievement here in Waterford?
Glad you asked. And this is my time for my presentation? All right. Do I just advance? How do I advance?
Arrow key down.
Oh, okay. Got it. All right. So I thought I would title it as plainly as I could. I was given this prompt, as you all know, pardon me, to guide my presentation. With limited access to data and certainly to people, and preparing this, I was limited in the amount of detail I could include. But on the other hand, I feel like in many ways this is a good way to discuss my approach, in general terms. Because right now we're talking about a huge investment that you've all made in curriculum and your strategic plan. But as we move forward, other things will rise to the top, and I want you all to understand how it is that I approach the board priorities. Ultimately, my job, I feel, is to ensure that the entire system is operating in an efficient and effective manner that results in student growth and the achievement of the district's mission. And that's put about as plainly, I think, as I can make it. Wrong arrow. There we go. So I think that, and this is an ongoing process, obviously, but one that's more intense if you're new to an organization, is assessing how it is that we're functioning in each part of the district system. Are we doing our work efficiently and effectively? And how does our work, especially in these 3 areas, impact the work at the school level? Central office should operate as a support system for our schools. The real work of a school district happens in the classroom between the students and the teachers. And so my thought process is always, how are we designing and modifying the system such that there are as few interruptions and as few distractions as possible in that process, so that we're maximizing the quality of the time that our teachers and students have together. Similarly, I would go through a similar assessment process at the school level. And the questions are similar. We always want to be efficient and effective with the investment that we're making in our public's dollars. And with this new curriculum especially, are we making good on the promise that we made to our community? We've put in $2 or $3 million investment. That's a huge investment. Are we doing it right? Are we implementing with fidelity? Are all of our students getting equitable access to these resources? And have our teachers been supported appropriately? Teachers and other support staff been supported appropriately so that we can execute on this huge investment? As we go through too, do we pick up issues in the implementation? Is it impacting all students equitably? Or are there some gaps that we need to take a look at and perhaps make some adjustments to ensure that everyone's benefiting equitably? Are there alignment challenges between grade levels or between building levels? Are there some resource challenges that perhaps were not anticipated or that we overlooked on the front end that we need to address so that our teachers and students can be successful? The numbers data is hugely important, but the data only tell us a portion of the picture. We really need to talk to our students. We need to talk to our staff. We need to talk with our community. Can we pick up patterns among these various groups that correlate with perhaps some patterns that we found in the other auditing that we've done that's more numbers based. Is there a convergence of feedback among these groups that can really help us hone in on perhaps some core issues that need to be addressed? Or can we identify any red flag areas that need immediate attention so that they aren't exacerbated by just pure oversight? And are there areas that confound us and will require us to do some further investigation? This, as I said, is in some ways an ongoing process, but for someone coming in new to the district, I would want to dig very deeply into each of these areas to make sure I'm understanding the foundation that we're starting from. I'm a huge fan of W. Edwards Deming and continuous improvement. And this is a quote that I've referred to often in my career. A bad system will beat a good person every time. And I've found that in my career to be true. I have lots of examples of where that's proven true. In my own words, we cannot expect to improve and sustain academic achievement in a system that is inefficient, unreliable, unprofessional, or unresponsive to our core mission. The board articulates a core mission, and that needs to be our North Star. If it's not, we already have misalignment. So we need to make sure that everything that we're doing well, and that it ties directly back to achieving our mission. Sort of along the same lines, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Not my quote, Peter Drucker has famously said that. People matter more than strategy. Strategy is hugely important, don't get me wrong, but people win that tug of war every time. And so people matter more than strategy, and all staff are crucial to student success. So I need to be assured, and if I'm not, I need to figure out how to make this happen, that our bus drivers and our food and nutrition staff and our custodians and obviously our teachers and our teacher support personnel and our principals, everyone understands how it is that their role is contributing to the accomplishment of our mission and to the growth of our students. That's the only reason we exist, and people are more motivated and do a better job when they know that what they're doing is vitally important to the overall success of the district mission. More specific to the large investment in curriculum, and this is something that there's lots of different ways to do this, but we need to verify the appropriate implementation of our investment. Are we implementing as designed with fidelity? Is there additional support needed somewhere? Do we have a system in place to ensure consistent implementation and alignment? So where you are right now, we expect an implementation curve. Once we feel like we're on solid ground, we can't step away from it and assume everything is going to go swimmingly from there on out. We need to continue to make sure, as staff changes, as staff assignments change, as obviously our students change year over year, we need to continue to make sure that we're doing what we said we would do and that we're doing it well. Strategic plan. What is our system for keeping our strategic plan a part of our daily work? A strategic plan, you all I know are familiar with strategic plans from your board work, but in other areas of your life, and too often the strategic plan is visited once a year to see how we did. And that's not really a strategic plan, in my view. So I'm of a mind of incorporating the elements of the strategic plan into everyone's daily work so that the strategic plan is our work. And when I look at your strategic plan, you cover all of the bases pretty thoroughly. So are we measuring our day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month work as a staff against what the expectations of the strategic plan are, so that we know where we are and where we're not making progress, where we need to make some adjustments, and how it is that we're investing our time, so that over the period of time of the strategic plan, we can actually realize the original intent, and not have it become so watered down and maybe measured so meaninglessly that it was one of those more showpieces than actually a document of substance that's guiding the district. And then finally, this last part, are we working purposefully across departments and across grade and building levels to ensure full alignment? Because of how schools are set up, traditionally set up, like Waterford is set up by grade level, I think it's intuitive that, well, yeah, of course, you finish kindergarten, you go into first grade, and the adult work follows in kind. That's rarely purely the case. And so we need to be actively looking for elements of misalignment in the work that we do, in an effort to, one, spare students for unnecessary repetition, but more importantly, to ensure that we're always challenging our students as they move forward. Make sure we're not spending so much time going over material that was already learned, that we're losing opportunities in the process. And we need to make sure that all of our adults are working thoughtfully as it relates to their colleagues. We need to function as a team. The superintendent needs to function as a team member. Everybody else needs to function as a team member. Again, we're a system. Everything that we do as a system has an impact on every other part of the system. And a lot of times that's invisible, or it's not, the connections aren't consciously made, but it doesn't mean that they're not there. Every investment we make here means we're not making as big of an investment over here. So we really need to work as a team, and one of the best ways to do that is to center our work around the strategic plan. And that's, I think I've probably used my 7 or 8 minutes for my presentation, but that's in a nutshell. We're all on the same team pursuing the same mission.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Earhart. We will now turn it over to Vice President Wagner.
By the way, this is much more pleasant in person. Thank you.
Please tell us more about what interested you in the Waterford Superintendency and what you hope to bring to our district based on your previous job and life experiences.
My wife and I have been looking for our next opportunity as a family, and we have one son who's in 7th grade that we hope to move only once. We know what we want from a community and from a school system, and Waterford appears to check all of those boxes. Being here in person, what a beautiful place. I know this is a beautiful time of year, but the trees are glorious. And the people have been absolutely welcoming and forthcoming, and the kind of people that I think my family would fit in well with. So we were looking for a Midwestern community. We weren't super picky about size, but we're hoping for something a little bit smaller than what we were used to in Des Moines, which we loved, but 30,000 students in a district, it's a little difficult from a superintendent perspective, selfishly, to have as much of a personal touch at each site as you would like. And I apologize, I missed the second part of the question, I know.
What do you hope to bring to our district based on your previous job and life?
Yeah, I taught for 11 years, which I think is probably unusual I know it's unusual for superintendents, actually for most school administrators. And I always have that teacher perspective at the back of my mind. I really view the teacher in the classroom with the students as the core building block of a school district. If we can make things work well in that space, then we're doing most of our work right, I think. So I bring that perspective, but I've also had the privilege of serving as a human resources director in a really fast-growing district. So we did lots and lots of hiring, and I was the original human resources director for that district. So I was building lots of systems to facilitate an efficient human resources function. I was a curriculum director in a district a little bit smaller than Waterford, with a very diverse student population. So I've served in that capacity as well. I was a principal in a middle school for 3 years, where we did some very innovative things that proved to be extremely successful. And we took a school that had been failing for years and years and years, and in 3 years' time, we were able to make it the best behaved middle school, as well as meeting all of our academic benchmarks. It was really hard work, but I learned a lot through that process, and have a really good sense about what solutions might work in what situations. And I think I can bring that to Waterford, because I know among your buildings there are lots of differences. So I know that there are a lot of things that you can do at the district level that can help support all schools, but that's not always the only way forward. Sometimes you have to be more responsive to a particular dynamic in a particular situation. Over my 10 years as superintendent of Des Moines Public Schools, I think that if you look at what I've done, I've not shied away from big systems-wide changes if it's the appropriate change, and we can demonstrate that it's going to benefit everyone. I've also not shied away from not doing some things that appear to be, I don't like using this word, but it seems to fit. It looks like a sexy solution, really appealing, easy to market, but that doesn't have the kind of substance behind it that will result in sustained progress over time. Yeah. So I would, in total, I just think that I have some very meaningful experience, and I've been able to achieve success in a number of areas that I think would serve the Waterford district and community very well.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to pass the microphone over to Treasurer Donahue.
Unfortunately, crisis events and trauma can happen in schools. How have you led your school community through crisis situations to ensure student safety and maintain continuity in education?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a really important question, especially these days. In Des Moines, we had a crisis response team that also doubled as a bereavement team. So the same team was, if we, for instance, lost a student to natural causes, or a staff member to natural causes, we would send the bereavement team in, which were mostly counselors and therapists, not all, but most of them. They were all district employees, though, and they had a whole protocol that they would go through to ensure that everybody was, that we had the situation stabilized, that everybody had resources, including the families of those affected. That same team would respond in our crisis situations. Thankfully, we didn't have a lot of those. We had some that we thought were going to be crises situations. We did have, unfortunately, 2 years, my second to the last year in Des Moines, a student was shot on the very edge of one of our high school campuses, and that was hugely traumatic. The first thing is to make sure that you have an active plan in place that's rehearsed enough that you can execute. And I was so proud of my team and how we responded, and how we communicated as we went through that really 24-hour period where things seemed to be chaotic, just because there's such a high degree of trauma. So the first thing is making sure that you have a plan that you keep alive through hopefully through practice, not actually having to use it. And then two, making sure, especially these in a district this size where you have multiple campuses, that you're very clear on what the lines of communication are, both during the episode, but also as you communicate with the community and the press once the initial incident concludes. Because as we all know, perception becomes reality very quickly, especially in the social media age. And if you're not very timely and clear and loading the right channels with the right information as quickly as you can, whatever the event was will live on to be something even worse than what everyone has already been traumatized by. So controlling the message is really huge. Always being accurate and truthful, but making sure that the correct information is being delivered to the right audiences as expeditiously as possible.
Follow-up question for that.
Yeah.
Would you support our administrative staff from central office down through building principals to take like courses through like incident command structure? You talk about very clear communication. That's why I asked that question.
I would be supportive of that. Yeah. I think it depends. I would like to see what's already in place and what the skill set of those who are going to affect that process are. But it wouldn't surprise me at all if we couldn't benefit from some sort of training in that regard. I mean, it's really gross. I mean, I remember the shooting, the Columbine shooting very clearly. I had just moved back from Colorado to Iowa, and I was teaching. I had been in that high school as a speech coach, and it was something that just seemed otherworldly. And the number of incidents that we've all, in some way or other, been through since then is horrendous, and we do have to absolutely have that as a high priority.
We're now going to turn the microphone over to Secretary Torres, please.
Fostering a culture that embraces the vast diversity of our district is key to our students and to our staff's success. How will you work to ensure our school culture continues to value diversity throughout every aspect of the district? And what are your experiences in working in diverse communities?
Yeah, my first two jobs in education were as a high school teacher, and in both of those positions, I had a significant number of language learners. Most of those were Central American or Mexican because of where I was. As I moved through, especially in Des Moines, my student body was 65% non-white when I left, and the country of birth of our students ranged to over 100 different countries. Not their parents' country of birth, the students' country of birth, and they spoke over 100 different languages. What I did, so that didn't happen all at once, obviously, but as immigration laws changed and policies changed and administrations changed at the federal level, patterns changed, and so Des Moines had become really the only place in Iowa where refugees and most of our immigrants would land initially, and so they would land in Des Moines public schools. So we did a number of things to make sure that we were serving them well, but we also did a number of things to make sure that we were all building a community together and not having an us versus them viewpoint. So, for instance, one of the things that we did was we worked with Lutheran Social Services, which was the only entity in Des Moines that helped with the intake of new refugees, and we partnered with them to create what we called a Center for New Americans, and that provided the families, not just the children, but the families too, with support in finding housing, finding solid employment, and navigating the city and navigating the school system, as well as, we did what you would typically expect, how we would serve students. We developed our ELL team developed curriculum that was grade level appropriate even through high school, but was taught specifically through a sheltered instruction lens, so that students who came in not proficient in English but didn't come to us until the middle school or high school level could actually take grade level coursework and be on track to graduate legitimately, and not just have dumbed down curriculum because we didn't know how to teach chemistry, for instance, to a multilingual group of students. I negotiated an alternative teacher contract. I actually did this as associate superintendent in Des Moines, but implemented it while superintendent, where we provided really intense support for new teachers who opted into the contract. A lot of that focus was on things that we knew they weren't prepared for in their teacher preparation programs. And for us, the primary challenge is being comfortable and proficient in serving a diverse student population. In Iowa, most of the teachers come from little towns that are populated with a bunch of people that look like me, and they don't have much exposure, even in college, in many cases, to any level of diversity. And so to help them be comfortable and to give them the skills they need, not just language learning skills, but cultural literacy type skills, they needed extra support. After that, after 4 years in that program, we actually paid for a master's degree that we designed with Drake University called a Master's of, it's kind of a long title, it's a Master of Science in Culturally Responsive Leadership and Education. And so they all went through that very rigorous, and they'll tell you it was a rigorous program, not designed to train principals, but designed to help teachers become the cultural leaders among the faculties that they served on, to help spread that knowledge and comfort. And we had extremely good luck with that program. And a lot of those teachers did end up pursuing leadership positions, but that's a program that's still going very strong.
Just a quick follow-up on that.
Sure.
It sounds like a lot of experience with the diversity piece. In what ways can you give an example that you celebrated diversity in a district that you were a leader in?
Yeah, so one way that I celebrated diversity was I created a superintendent student advisory committee, which was comprised of students from all of our comprehensive high schools, that was absolutely representative of our student body. So we had the same percentage of white students, black students, Latinx students, Asian students represented on that committee, and that's one small way. But a bigger way, and I guess I don't know if you'd call this a celebration or not, but over time, and we made a ton of progress as soon as I became superintendent and started pushing this, was we dramatically expanded the enrollment of our students of color in AP courses. And we broke down most of the AP courses in the district at that time were offered at a central location called Central Campus, where the culture there was, this is for the rich kids. And so almost all of the kids there were from well-to-do homes. They were almost all white, and they all did extremely well in school. But we weren't providing those same opportunities elsewhere. So I decreased the number of AP courses we offered at the central location and only offered courses that we didn't offer in all the other comprehensive high schools. And we pushed all the AP courses, had to train a lot of teachers to do this. But the number of students of color taking AP courses and completing them successfully exploded. And the reason that that's so important, besides the obvious, is that even if they don't take the AP exam, the chances of a student who has successfully completed an AP course of attending and completing college, a 4-year college degree, is dramatically higher. And so we really started trying to change how our students thought about themselves, regardless of what their background, their family's background was in education, especially because a lot of these families did not have a history of success in academia. And I'm forgetting, I just had another thought in my head that I just dropped real quickly that was completely pertinent. I apologize. I dropped it. It was a good one too. It might come back at the end. Sorry.
Circle back.
Yeah.
Let's,
Oh, I know what it was. Sorry. Do you mind? It's okay. So the Central Academy, a wonderful facility, taught a bunch of different world languages, had accelerated math and science courses. So, for instance, you could take physics and 2 years of physics in 1 year's time because they would accelerate for really bright students. Again, the enrollment at that facility did not reflect the enrollment of our district. And so I made it a point to say the enrollment at this school, without dumbing things down, but the enrollment of this school is going to reflect the enrollment at each of our 5 schools. And we didn't get there before I left, but we were darn close. And lo and behold, guess what? Scores didn't go down. We still have as many National Merit Scholars and as many National Merit Scholar finalists as we've ever had. They just don't all look the same. And that took a lot of cajoling. It took a lot of patience to listen to pushback that I didn't think was fairly warranted. But when you provide real opportunity and you provide scaffolded support for people who've not had the opportunities all the way through, you learn that our kids are not very much different at all. But we need to serve them appropriately at each level so that they can take advantage of all the wonderful things that we know ultimately they're capable of if we provide the right pathway.
we're now going to turn the microphone to Trustee Sutherland. We do have about 30 minutes. I want to make sure that we have some
Okay,
time
all right.
for our audience to ask questions. So, and we've got 4, 5, 6, 7. So,
Okay.
4 questions left here.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. Gerhard. While the duties and the role of the superintendent are essentially the same from district to district, not accounting for how different it must be to have 30,000 kids, but communities do vary greatly. How will you navigate this transition to become part of the Waterford School District community and shape the way in which you lead to best benefit our staff and most especially our students?
Listening is going to have to be my go-to. I really need to genuinely listen as much as possible to as many people as possible, and ask a lot of questions. It is so easy to make assumptions about why things are the way they are, why things aren't the way they aren't, without taking the time to actually learn the community. So listening and asking questions is going to be vital for quite some time, frankly. Well, my wife and I tend to be pretty embedded in our community. My wife does a ton of volunteering, not all at school. She does with a lot of different organizations around Des Moines, and I do as well. So I don't think it's going to be difficult for us to find opportunities to learn the community, but that doesn't change the fact that we have to, come in with minds open and ears open, and not make unwarranted assumptions about things. I am a pretty good learner, and I like doing that. I spend a lot of time as superintendent listening. That's where you learn the most. So that would be my general approach.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're past the microphone to Trustee Petrucia.
Please tell us about your experience with early childhood centers and any specific work you've done with early childhood programming.
Okay. In Des Moines, we offered 4-year-old preschool, and in one school we offered 3-year-old preschool. That was we have one public Montessori in the state of Iowa, which is part of the Des Moines district, and that's the only school that had a 3-year-old program, which was it was on a graduated scale as far as cost for families. There were about 1,000 students. I'm just going to be very blunt with you. There were about 1,000 4-year-olds every year in Des Moines that did not receive preschool. And that's a whole state funding issue. But I'm a firm believer, and I have the data to prove it, that early childhood makes all the difference in the world. There's just no arguing it. So one of the challenges that we had in Des Moines when I became superintendent is that we had at that time, I think it was 37 elementary schools, and most of those elementary schools had 2 or 3 preschool classrooms. And where those were located each year sort of depended on where the children were coming from. And not that we didn't have good teachers, but it was really difficult to make sure that we were serving students well and equitably when we had 1 or 2 or 3 teachers in a school that was primarily designed to be a kindergarten through 5th grade school. They were sort of this year I have 2 preschool sections. Next year I might not have any. So principals weren't necessarily well trained in pre-K. Nor did they, by system design, have a particular vested interest in its success, because you never knew year to year if you were going to have 0 or no classrooms. So we set about making more of a center-based pre-K program. So we took 2 existing elementary schools that had been closed, and converted those into early childhood centers. We took another school there were 3 schools that were closed. One of those became our early childhood special education program center, and we served non-special ed there as well. And then we built a state-of-the-art early childhood facility right in the urban core, where our families who most needed preschool had the least access. And so transportation became way less of an issue, and we had a beautiful new facility right where it was needed most. So we had 4 early childhood centers under the direction of a director of early childhood who was excellent. And we really solidified from a curriculum standpoint and an alignment standpoint what our students were experiencing in that 4-year-old preschool. So we knew we were setting them up for success to be a kindergartner in Des Moines. What I didn't think of until, unfortunately, a few years into my superintendency, but it actually worked, is so what we received from state funds in Iowa for 4-year-old preschool was always a year in arrears. So the only way to grow a program, to add another classroom, was to find the money somewhere else, and including staffing and materials and everything. And then if you filled that the next year, you had the pump primed. So I started lobbying individual businesses and giving them naming rights for a classroom. If they would give us, it equated to about $75,000 cost for equipping a classroom with the appropriate furnishings, paying for a teacher and an associate. I think that was pretty much all the expenses. And then we would name it after Principal Financial. But once we had that initial investment, filling that classroom again next year, we already had, that number of students in the pipeline. And so we grew 4 or 5 classrooms over the last half of my superintendency that way. We worked the legislature pretty heavily at various times to get better funding, because all we had was funding for 10 hours a day, for 5 days a week. We offered 12 hours, we had, 10 hours a week. We offered 12 hours a week, 4 out of the 5 days. Students would get 3 hours a day, but there was no money for transportation. There was no support for ELL. It was really shoestring. So I was really happy with how we did with the amount of resources that we had to direct that way, but we never did enough. And one of the ways I tried to help our community understand is that when I would share, especially reading data for our elementary schools, one of the slides I would always show is, here's our first graders that had a 4-year-old preschool experience. Their performance compared to our students who didn't have a 4-year-old preschool experience. And there was a stark difference even through 5th grade. It's really hard to argue against the necessity of at least a 4-year-old experience, and it's awesome that you all are providing a 3-year-old experience as well, because that's frankly more appropriate for a lot of our kids, even though a lot of our policymakers don't.
We're going to turn the microphone
Leave
over to
that.
Trustee Goslin with 2 questions left, about 20 minutes left.
What methods have you used to attract and retain quality staff?
I referenced the alternative teacher contract that I negotiated before. That helped us recruit, namely because they got a little bit, wasn't huge, but they got a little bit of a higher salary in their first 4 years. But they also knew that if they stayed with us, they would have a really high quality master's degree for free. So that's the single biggest thing that I've done that actually helped us not only be more competitive in hiring, but our data about retention was overwhelmingly positive. That seeing that we were retaining after 5 years 95% of our new hires, which is unheard of, especially in an urban environment like Des Moines. With leaders, I do remember. I remember when I was hired as a principal in Des Moines. There was a failing middle school that they had interviewed to fill the principalship twice, and they hadn't found anybody. And I got recruited to apply for it the 3rd time around. And I applied, and I got the job. And I remember one of the things that really struck me as I learned the system was every time we had a principal vacancy, there was like this panic, like, oh my God, where are we going to find a principal? So I thought, well, we need to be developing our own principals, is what we need to be doing. And the other thing that we need to be doing is finding opportunities for teachers, not necessarily to be funneled into the principalship, but ways that they can grow in their career without necessarily leaving the classroom. Because to be honest with you, that's one of the reasons I left the classroom was I thought, gosh, I don't really want to be a principal, but what else is there for me in education? And I'm kind of burned out on teaching, and there just didn't seem to be other avenues. So so when I was a principal, I created a position called a school improvement leader. And you didn't have to have an administrator's degree to serve in that role. But how I described it when I was selling it to central office at the time was, it's a greenhouse for principals. They're going to take 1 grade level. So I had 3 grade levels in my middle school. I had 3 school improvement leaders. I had to cut other positions to pay for them, which I was happy to do. So they didn't just throw me 3 FTE and say, yeah, go for it. That's curious. So they had charge of their grade level. So they were sort of the counselor, the dean, the principal for that grade level. And I'll tell you, they got to know those families really, really well. We had about 600 students in our middle school. So each grade level had, approximately 200 students. They got to know the students intimately. There were only 200 they were focused on. They got to know their families really well. We had much better conversations with families. And this is a student population, mind you, that was virtually 100% free and reduced price lunch and over 20% English language learners. And about a third black, a third Latinx, a third white, and 10% a mix of everything else. So it was very diverse. It was a true intercity school. But we changed the way that that we operated, and those three people loved their job. Some of them did. Actually, two of them did become principals. They decided after they had that experience. One decided she didn't want to do that anymore, but didn't want to be a principal, so she became a really effective literacy coach. But I guess my point is, I want to be able to tell people, we're going to bring you on board at Waterford, and we're going to figure out what the best seat on the bus is for you. So we developed career tracks. If you want to become a principal and you came here as a teacher, here's what has to happen for you, and here's how we can support you in that. If you come into our school as a secretary, but you really want to be a teacher, here's how we're going to support you to become a teacher. I put together a program. This is corny, I know. It's called 3D. It was Des Moines Public Schools, Drake University, and Des Moines Area Community College. And without any grant money, we put together this program where we recruited underrepresented potential teachers who represented populations that we didn't have enough representation of in our staff. So a lot of them were custodians or secretaries or all sorts of different roles at the community college or the university. And we recruited them as teachers and helped them on a individual by individual basis. So some didn't need very much help. Some came in with already an associate's degree. Some needed help with childcare, so we would help out with that. Some would need some help with technology. At any rate, the three of us would problem solve, casework each one of these candidates, and we started churning out 3 or 4 new teachers a year, which doesn't sound like very much, but there were 3 or 4 that we wouldn't have had otherwise. And it was also a great lesson to our students to see, the woman who was answering phones in my school is now teaching algebra in my school, So it was a great way to build community and to attract people because they knew they could move. We had teachers that would move into central office assessment roles. We really looked as creatively as we could at how we can let people stay in our system and retain that institutional knowledge and that passion that they have for our kids and community, but in a place where they feel like they can exercise their talents more effectively.
Thank you. So just in about 12 minutes left, so in just 2 or 3 minutes, so we have some time for our audience questions.
Yeah.
If you could please tell us about a time when you were confronted with a difficult, unexpected set of circumstances for which you lacked the answers. How did you deal with those circumstances? I'll share with you a time. I had just become superintendent, and I got a phone call from the superintendent in Ames, Iowa. So Ames is the home of Iowa State University. It's about a half hour north of Des Moines. And I knew him. He was a lot older than I was, but I knew him because we had previously both been human resources directors and gotten to know each other that way. And he said, Tom, Ames isn't going to come down and play East on Friday. This is, I think, on a Wednesday. And I said, for football. East was our East Side high school, very diverse, and poor, really high. East could have been a Title I high school. That's how poor it was. And I said, well, Tim, why would Ames not come down and play us at Williams Field? Well, we heard that there was going to be a shooting. And so I quickly put the pieces together. There had been a rumor that some kid was going to bring a gun to school, on social media. We had already responded to it. We had identified who the student was. We had a really good relationship with our police department.
The police had identified the student. We had everything had been taken care of. And I said, Tim, there will not be a safer place to play a football game than at Williams Field on Friday night. I can promise you. I mean, we have undercover police all over the place, and they're doubling down because of this, incident. And he says, well, he goes, I don't know. And I said, well, think about it. I said, this is also our parents' night. So all of our fall activity students are being recognized at that game. Parents are taking time off work to be there. Plus we need the concession dollars, and we need the gate. We weren't flush. So he said, well, let me talk to some board members. So he called me back the next day, and he says, yeah, we can't go down there. I just think it's going to be too dangerous. And I said, okay, Tim, let's talk to the athletic association. Maybe that's what needs to happen. Let's talk to the athletic association. And I was certain that we would get on a conference call with the athletic association. They would see with clear eyes that there was no reason that Ames couldn't come down and play. So then I got a phone call. This may have been, it was Thursday, from a representative of the athletic association. Tim had gone ahead and called them, given them his side of the story, and they said, your choice is either to come to Ames to play on Friday night or to host Ames on Saturday afternoon at Williams Field. And a lot of our kids worked, and Saturday was the only day they could work. It would have been a disaster. And I thought, holy cow, how am I going to get out of this? I know I'm right. And I even said, look, so if Sioux City North doesn't want to come play East, the following week, all they have to do is say, well, we heard something on Facebook, so you guys are going to have to come up here. So I couldn't see an immediate out. I called a former professor of mine who had been a superintendent to see what he thought of it. I called a couple of my peers from around the metro area who were also in the same conference to see what they would do. And then I went to meet with I'd already talked to the football coach, and I went to meet with his team on Thursday night. And a lot of those kids I knew because they had been my kids, my middle school kids, and I hated doing this, but I explained to them that this is an issue that's bigger than East. This is about Des Moines Public Schools and us retaining our right to be, to operate like every other school. And if we say yes, we'll go play Ames and Ames. I said, you guys might never play a home game again. And then who knows what's going to happen at North High School and at Hoover High School. So I said, don't hate your coach. If you're angry, you can be angry with me, but this is the rationale behind why I did it. We couldn't get them to budge. They said there was no way to appeal it. But we got to the media, and the media made us look like heroes and made Ames really look bad, and should have. And in the end, even though there technically wasn't an appeal process, we didn't have to forfeit the game. They called it a no contest, so our kids missed a game, but it was like the game was never on the schedule. And then, as it turns out, the playoffs started, and Ames' first playoff game was hosted at Williams Field, and they got trounced. So, to be honest with you, all the way through that, I didn't know how it was going to turn out. But there was no playbook for that situation, and so I tried to stay. I listened to all the input that I could find, and finally said, I'm going to do what in my heart and my gut tells me is right. And the board, thankfully, was grateful for how I handled it. But it was scary, I'll tell you, because I had no idea what was going to happen.
Mr. Eggert, thank you for that. We've got about 5-6 minutes here, and I have 3 questions.
Okay.
Okay. So the first question, where do you stand on outsourcing union jobs?
Well, I've never outsourced union jobs. I think that you know, you have to weigh the values of the community and also have some sense that in the long term that's going to be something that's beneficial. I know oftentimes outsourcing can look appealing in the very short term, but if you look at all the dynamics that play into it, it doesn't always play out that way. So I've not done it myself. I would certainly entertain it if it were something that you know, the community thought that we should pursue. But I think it's a little difficult sometimes to in the long term make it work. I should correct that. I did outsource lawn care.
What are your thoughts on bringing skilled trade opportunities back to our schools and/or public service training, police, fire, teaching, social work, etc.?
I'm a big proponent of that. We created the first certified apprenticeship program in Des Moines about 5 years ago for welding, and we had students, a lot of whom, frankly, were identified as special education students, walking into a $40 an hour job even prior to graduation. We ended up building 5 certified apprenticeship programs that I feel very strongly about for a couple of reasons. Number one, especially in any of the construction trades, there's a shortage virtually everywhere around the country. So real good paying work opportunities are available. But like I always tell my students, you're not making a decision that you have to remain loyal to for the rest of your life, you know. But think, if you're making $40 an hour right out of high school, now you have the capacity, if you want to attend school, get an associate's degree while you're working, you know, a whole bunch of opportunities become a reality when you can solidify that financial foundation. So I think it's really important that we continue to build on those opportunities. And by the way, they're not they're a lot more complicated to get certified than a lot of people think. Technology moves really quickly, and there is a higher than you would think base level of especially mathematics and technology skill that you need to be successful. So it's not like we're selling the kids short by providing them those opportunities. And then what did you say? Oh, the public service. Yeah, I actually started a public service program at our central campus that would, it introduced, the first level introduced students to the basic functions of all of the public service areas that we offered in Des Moines. So they had a unit on the police force, including, you know, social workers in a police station, all the different functions that happen within the police force, the fire department and fire and rescue, the paramedics, the Department of Human Services, all of the areas that are provided that are public services that I discovered our students know very little about. And what really gave me the idea was how many seniors I would ask what they're going to study in college, and they would tell me criminal justice. And I would say, really? Half our graduating class are going to be police officers. So I realized there's a pretty high level of ignorance on what each of those areas do. And in Des Moines, not unlike a lot of other places, perhaps here, there's a shortage of folks filling those positions, and certainly a shortage of representatives of all the parts of our community. So we want to make sure that the people serving in those roles are reflective of the entire population that we're in service to. And that was a good way to introduce a lot of folks, and we had a lot of success with that. Another thing that we did was we had a certified CNA program, so students could get their full certification in CNA. We started offering a section of that program specifically for English language learners. And it worked really well for 2 reasons. One, it's a great way for students to learn how our language is made. You know, they have to learn base, you know, all these base vocabulary and how to put together using a root and the prefixes and suffixes. So once they learn all the vocabulary, heck, they pretty much know English. And a lot of those kids really needed an opportunity to earn money. And so they had a legitimate way to keep them and a lot of times, unfortunately, their families fed while they continued with their education.
Thank you. One last question here. Please tell us about your experience related to equitable practices in special education and or related advocacy work.
Yeah, special education can be really difficult, and sometimes it's really difficult because practitioners make it too difficult. Sometimes, I can tell you that by my experience with special education has been good, but I do put a critical eye towards special education in a few ways. I think we tend to over-identify at too early an age, especially for behavior identifications. And I think that a robust preschool program probably eliminates a lot of that tendency. But that's certainly something that I found in Des Moines, as we had a ton of students that were labeled as oppositional defiant or just generic behavior disorder that really weren't. You know, they just hadn't had time to acclimate to the school environment, or didn't have appropriate language skills to communicate effectively enough for them not to engage in those kinds of behaviors. So the other piece of that too is that oftentimes we identify issues that are really language learning issues as learning disabilities. And that's a really difficult thing to discern, so I'm certainly not critical of when that happens, but it's really easy to label a student with a learning disability when really they haven't had enough time or enough instruction in English language to demonstrate proficiency there. So those are two areas where I think we need to be really careful and critical. And the third thing is we need to approach special education with the idea that we will, when students get identified, we will unidentify them at some point during their schooling. You know, the idea is take somebody who's discrepant in their performance according to their peers and catch them up and give them the learning tools that they need so that they can not be discrepant from their peers. And so it used to be that it wasn't unusual, at least in my first couple of years in education, that I would be part of exiting a student from special education. And that seems to happen less and less. And so I think looking at our special education system, we need to look at real critically how it is that we're serving our students, and we need to make darn sure that we're not preventing them from accessing grade level curriculum, which is the only way they're ever going to exit. And that's something that happens far too often. So special education's super important, and I'm a fan of it, but I also am pretty careful about making sure that we're serving the students who really need it, and that we're not misidentifying and then getting somebody stuck in a system that they feel like they can't get out of.
Dr. Ahart, we appreciate you being here. We've come to the end of our time. We know how much work it is to prepare for these interviews and how much time and effort it takes. So we are especially thankful that you made the trip to come see us.
Absolutely.
So,
thank you for having
me. As
me.
you know, we had 2 interviews this evening, and if you are selected as the finalist, we will be reaching out.
Okay. All right.
We appreciate you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the privilege. It was an honor, and I appreciate having some time to spend with you all. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. All right.